Hello, friends, and welcome into another episode of the Marriage Talk Podcast. Bill Hobson here, along with Jay and Laura LaFoon, as we continue on this journey to hopefully helping you enjoy the happily ever aftering years together in your marriage. And we know this, Jay and Laura, since we're both parents, we're all parents, that there's a key, crucial factor, a variable in the marriage relationship, and that is, for many people, what comes somewhere down the road with the addition of new human beings to your house and the challenges that come along with marriage and parenting. And so both this week and next week, we'll dive into this, what can sometimes be a fairly contentious issue between husbands and wives, right?
So I'm just going to give you my, what happened to me. Okay. When I got married, I realized how selfish I really was as a human being. Because when I got married, I realized that I had to not only care about myself, but I had to care about Laura. I had to think about her feelings, think about what her wants.
Heavens to Betsy, when I think about her feelings.
Yes, it wasn't all about me. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, well, boy, am I selfish. Then we had kids, and it became ever clear how selfish, my self-centered, self-absorbed, whatever word you want to use. Oh my goodness, because now I not only have to think about Laura, who's a human, adult, I have to think about this little being that needs 24, care 24/7, and it's up to us. And it was just, it's not a little change. It's a major shift in how life happens, and I don't think no one's ever prepared for it, but everyone, that dives into it understands the joy that it brings. I mean, it's just unbridled joy.
Yeah, you hear these couples say, well, we're not having kids until we're ready for it. I'm like, honey, you're never ready for it. You may think you are, but you're never ready for what's about to happen to not only your relationship, but your body, your home,
your husband's barely potty trained. You can hardly, how you got to handle it. And so the challenges, the serious challenges that come in raising kids and maintaining a healthy marriage at the same time are sometimes very, very, I can't think of the word. It's just daunting. There we go. It's daunting. And anyone who doesn't have kids doesn't understand that. Everyone who has kids knows. You feel there are moments in your life where you feel, I can't do this. I'm not capable. I don't have the skill set. I need more sleep. All those things.
You have those thoughts, whether they're 5 months old or whether they're 25 years old. You have those thoughts, and even when they're out of your parenting doesn't stop when they move out. And that's the reality. You're a parent. Once you give birth, you're a parent for the rest of your life.
And so
they just listen less once they break the 25-year mark. So we all deal with kind of those generational shifts. And I also, Jay, you were talking about selfishness and trying to break free from that. You're talking to the right guy there, because I remember when my Mustang convertible gave way to a minivan. And I thought to myself, well, it just couldn't possibly get any more onerous than this. I mean, sure, I'm glad to have this beautiful little girl in my life, but does she have any idea what I just gave up? Like a sliding door on the side instead of the top that goes down. This is crazy. So as you start to dig into some of the dynamic changes that take place within a household, within the couple, is it all reliant upon kind of putting yourself in the back seat as opposed to the driver's seat like you're used to be?
I think part of what happens is that we do put ourselves in the back seat, and you put this child in the driver's seat. And we worked really hard at not doing that. I think that's the reality of what most marriages think. Well, now that I've got this human being baby that I have to take care of, he's an adult. He can take care of himself. I'm not going to worry about him anymore. I've got to worry about this child. And what happens is you begin to put the child in the driver's seat, and you put your marriage relationship and yourself in the back seat, which you have to have all three. You have to have the child, and you have to have yourself, and you have to have your marriage all working
proper
together in
seats.
balance.
And the reality is, as a parent, your calling as a parent is to move these children out of the house and to create responsible adults. And so when we put them in the driver's seat, well, I mean, you want to talk about creating even more selfish people than ourselves. You know, the world revolves around the child. That's a recipe for disaster.
And I will say that's easier for us to say this side of having newborns than it is to say when you're in the middle of it. But trying to be conscious, and the most important thing to realize is that you're going to go through seasons. I mean, I remember when our last one got out of diapers, we were like, woohoo, we can
have McDonald's now
or something. Yeah. You just, you go through these seasons of parenting, and every one of them is different, but there are some principles that stay the same. And one of those is, don't make your marriage and your relationship revolve around the child. The child needs to fit into what you've created here. The child is coming into this, and yes, the child is important. Yes, they're your flesh and blood, but to let that little being take over is a mistake.
And we've all experienced
We've all
this. Our son, about a year and a half ago, we were talking about schedules, and he said, "Dad, our life is being run by an 18-month-old dictator." He's, and I mean, I'm like, okay, I get it, because sleep schedules and feeding schedules and all that, but it doesn't have to be that way forever. As the child matures and grows, they need to understand that when mommy and daddy say it's time for dinner, it's time for dinner. When mommy and daddy say it's time to go to school, it's time to go to school. Those kind of things. And that seems so basic, but it's easy to let the child, especially the young child, and maybe this is what we'll do, is we'll focus on the young child this week and go on to older children later. But that young child, it's amazing how manipulative they can be, even at 2 and 3 years old, to create habits that are just not healthy for your marriage. Like, mommy and daddy, I'm scared, I want to sleep in your bed. Oh, sorry. I will come and rub your back and let you fall asleep in your bed, and I'll be there to make sure that you're safe. But sleeping in mommy and daddy's bed is not going to happen. That's mommy and daddy's bed for a reason.
We were just babysitting our grandgirls a couple weeks ago, and our 3-year-old granddaughter is going through this very thing of, she wants everything needs to be about what she wants. And I was putting her to bed, and she wanted me to lay in the bed with her. So I'm like, okay, I will for 5 minutes. For 5 minutes, because she has this routine. You read books, you sing songs, you say your prayer, you leave the room. Well, we did all that, but then we needed grandma to cuddle with her. And like, I'm grandma, I can't say no. So I did 5 minutes, and I got ready to leave. And of course, she's holding on to me, grabbing me. Grandma, don't leave me. I don't want you to leave me. And so I'm like, 5 more minutes. So I gave her 5 more minutes, and I could tell she was exhausted. She was tired. She was going to fall asleep any minute. And so I just said, you know what? Grandma's going to go take a shower, and I'll come back and check on you. Grandma went and took a shower. Grandma didn't come back and check on her because I knew she was out. I have a little monitor I can see, which those are wonderful. We didn't have those when our kids were young. But being the adult and not letting that 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old tell you what you're going to do. I mean, obviously, if they're sick, they have fevers, that's all different. But I knew she was ready to fall asleep. She was exhausted. She was just putting this new thing into her repertoire, which she'd been doing with mom and dad, and they were doing exactly what grandma did. So, you have to be in the driver's seat in some of those situations.
Yeah, I can remember very well being the new dad and firmly stating to my wife, we shall not be giving in to this child. When our daughter was in the next room of our tiny house, and she was just screaming bloody murder at bedtime, and she was under the age of 2. That's what I remember. She had a crib of some sort. And so we're in our room, and it's 6 feet away, separated by a 1/2-inch thick particle board wall in our little starter house. And my wife, Ellen, is like, I really think we should go. No, she is not coming in here. Then a little while later, we hear what I will continue to cite as the most sickening sound I've ever heard, which was her head hitting the hardwood floor because
Oh,
she had
no.
successfully pulled off a jailbreak by flipping over the top rung of the
mm,
crib and just going splat.
uh,
And we both sprint in there. We're sure that we are going to be on our way to some airlifted situation. And she's, obviously she's screaming now at a new level. And as I picked her up and she was fine, all I said was, I don't care if she's 17. She can sleep with us every night. The rest, I caved instantly. I caved instantly because of the moment, and the bravado of the decisive father quickly went away when circumstances changed and we were scared to death for what she had now learned how to do, which was fall to her own death.
exactly. What's only worse is that when our son was young, we did not have a changing table, so we used the top of the washer and the dryer. And I don't remember what happened, how it happened, but all I remember is I was changing a diaper once, and the next thing I knew, he was not on the top of the washer, he was on the floor. And I'm like, oops.
My bad.
And
Oh,
those
man.
situations are going to happen, just like it happened with you and Ellen. Those are going to happen. You're going to take that child, you're going to put her in the bed with you for the rest of the night. But, and I don't know if you did or not, we won't ask. But the next night, put her back in her bed.
Right.
And
Right.
don't bring her back into, that's the flexibility, but there has to be some.
And for
Rules.
folks that are thinking about having children,
It really is fun.
then you've got to talk about these kind of things before you have the kids, because what's going to happen is, Laura was raised one way, I was raised another, and as you come into having kids, it's like, well, my parents did it best. No, my parents did it best, and you've got to figure out between you how you're going to do it. One of my favorite things that I learned from my wife, because I'm a big softie, and anytime our son, who was our firstborn, would cry, I'm like, well, we need to go get him. We need to go get him. And she's like, no, he's fed, he's dry, and there's nothing, he's not got a fever or anything wrong. He's just wanting attention. And I was like, but he's crying. Right. But he's not hungry. He's not got a dirty diaper. He's okay. He's just went, I'm panicking, but she was right. At this point, she would say every 10 minutes, I'll go in there, I'll pat his back, I'll rub him, I'll calm him down.
Make sure he's still dry.
Make sure he's still dry. But I'm not going to pick him up and hold him like he wants to be held right now. And that was hard. I mean, like,
my mother-in-law she was out in the driveway leaving my house one night because I would not go pick my son up out of the bed. She's like, I'm out of here, I'm leaving. I'm like, okay, see you later.
Not be party to this sort of shenanigans.
yeah,
Well,
and it is, it's your family of origin really comes into play here when you're talking about how you're going to raise your kids, because all as a man or a woman is how you were raised. You don't know anything else. My father was a minister who was in the military, for crying out loud. I mean, it was yes, sir, no, sir. It was toe the line, period. Laura grew up in a little bit.
Sounds like I was heartless.
She grew up in a home that was a lot more lax, not lax like, oh, go do whatever you want, but they weren't as stringent as my father. And so she had a lot of different opinions than I did on how to raise kids. And one of them was the big one for me. I was like, okay, no, they did wrong. They need to be spanked. Well, back in the day that was okay. But Laura was like, no, the punishment needs to fit the crime.
There's natural consequences.
So spanking's not the answer for everything? No, it's not. And it was like, just this light bulb came on to me, like, oh, even though that's how my parents did it, and I came out semi okay,
still up for debate.
Well, I'm thinking about the conversations that take place between husbands and wives, because I think there are two layers of challenge here. I won't say difficulty, I'll say challenge. One is to try to bring into your parenting and into your marriage the good parts that came from how you were raised, and to leave out the parts that you kind of wish had been done differently. But then the second layer of the challenge, I think, is to not insult your partner by saying, we are not doing it like your parents did, because look at that mess. Because then all of a sudden you've got a whole new, now the baby crying is the least of your problems, because now you're
Yes.
getting the look, what,
Yep.
what did you just say to me?
Yep. Yep.
Volcano is ready to erupt.
And that really is the challenge, is saying, okay, there's not a perfect way to raise kids. If there was, we'd all be doing it. You've got some areas in your background that make sense. I've got some areas in my background that make sense. And this is the beautiful thing that I think, if couples get it, it really, really solidifies their relationship. It's not her way. It's not his way. It's our way. And when you can come together as a couple and say, this is how we're going to do it. You know, sorry, mom and dad, if you don't agree. Sorry, in-laws, if you don't agree. But this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to stick with it. Man, that builds an instant bond between husband and wife.
And so while you bring your own, I bring from my family of origin, he brings from his family of origin, but you have to build your own way. You have to build your own way of parenting. And what is it that you're going to do that maybe your parents did different? Not because one was right or wrong, but because it's, you know, too, our cultures change, world changes, society changes. I mean, when we didn't have phones when we grew up. We had rotary, you know, the time you picked up off the wall. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have personal devices like that. We didn't even have computers until I was in college that I had to use. And so having all of that, when we started raising our kids and the advent of the iPhone and cell phones and computers, that brought a whole different challenge to what was going on, in a dynamic that our parents didn't have to deal with. And so you have to really, again, the marital relationship has to remain the priority, because you have to communicate about these things and stay on the same page when it comes to everything, but also obviously parenting and your children.
I mean, I remember when I was probably 8 years old, the rule of the house was this: in the summertime, when the street lights come on, you've got 10 minutes to be home. And so we'd watch the street lights, and when the street lights came on, we'd say, hey, we're done and we're out of here. And that was our that was the safety net. Was, you know, mom and dad knew if it was after, you know, the street lights came on, if it was 10, 15 minutes afterward, they were going to come looking for us, and it was not going to be pretty. So we knew to be home. Well, that is so antiquated now. You can't do that now, because
our neighborhood doesn't have street lights.
Right.
You know, because it's just a whole different era. It's a whole different world. And most kids, unfortunately, are not outside. They're inside playing Xbox or whatever, instead of, they don't even know when the street lights come on. But it changes, but yet it stays the same. And what stays the same is that mom and dad have to get on the same page. We have to be on the same page so that we can come as a unified front against
against
the enemy, against the enemy, those children.
Well, another thing that comes, that continues through whatever era it is, if we're talking about in the context of really young children that we're parenting, is the unavoidable reality of exhaustion. For those of you listening who have more than two under the age of 5, may the Lord richly bless you.
Yes.
Yeah, and may
your sleep be doubled.
May he strengthen you and yes, and kind of redeem whatever hours you get. But let's talk for a moment about the impact on the marriage relationship that just sheer exhaustion can have, and how we don't want to let that spill over into changing the agreed upon things we put into place for the raising of our kids. Sometimes, along with training the child, it can take a personal toll on you, because sometimes it's just doggone tiring.
Oh, it's exhausting. I mean, when you've got young children, I vividly remember, and we were fortunate in that we had our kids 7 years apart. So we had 2 only children, so to speak. But when our son was born, our firstborn, I remember nights where it's 2:00 in the morning and I'm just crying, Lord, help this kid go to sleep, because I need to sleep. I've got work tomorrow. I've got meetings tomorrow. I've got things that have to be done tomorrow, and I have to be coherent, not even thinking about. I mean, the furthest thing from your mind at that point is, what does my wife need from me? You know what I'm saying? Because you're so exhausted, you're so spent, you can't think of anything but let me get this kid to sleep and let me get some sleep because I've got responsibilities tomorrow. And so, you've got to put some
exhaustion.
You got to put some
exacerbates everything.
You got to put some boundaries in there.
Exhaustion makes you cranky. It's going to make you probably have a few more conflicts than normal. Your lack of sleep is going to make you have, more cranky. You're not going to be well for the kids. You're not going to be. And so what you really have to do is try and figure out your schedules and share those responsibilities. I know growing up in the age that we did, it was, we were moving towards the mom and dad share responsibilities, but I grew up in a home where I had a sick father. So my mom carried the weight of everything. And so that's a different situation. But when you're both able-bodied, you've got to split up those responsibilities. And we did because we were both in ministry and we both had a flexible schedule. And because of the way that we were feeding our children, our kids they were bottle fed. Jay could share the nighttime responsibility. We would switch nights. This is his night, next night's my night. So we tried to do that in order for both of us to get sleep. So having some of those, sharing those responsibilities, sharing the responsibility of who's going to give a bath tonight, who's going to, make. Our son and his wife do a really good job of sharing those responsibilities. They have a whiteboard in their kitchen that they have everything written down on. It keeps everything organized, and who's doing what. And I think that's hugely important in this day and age where mom and dad are probably both working full time now. And in this day and age, mom and dad may both get maternity leave or paternity leave, as it's called now. They might both get 6 to 8 weeks off of work, which that would have been wonderful. But having the sharing of responsibilities, I think, is much more prevalent now. But you've really got to make sure that you lay those out so that and communicate about them so that you're not just assuming the other one knows what they're supposed to do. We need to talk about it. Again, that's the getting on the same page. That's the principle that goes through the whole thing of parenting, whether they're young babies or teenagers, is getting on the same page.
I would say the other thing is twofold. Don't beat yourself up. You're not going to get it right all the time. In fact, you might get it right less time than you get it wrong. You might get it wrong a lot because you're new at it. And then give yourself permission to take timeouts. Guess what, kids? Today is PJ Saturday. We're going to stay in our PJs all day. Mommy, daddy, and the kid. We're just going to stay in our PJs. What that is, we now, as adults, we call that, I need a mental health day. I need to take a day off of work for my mental health. Well, a PJ Saturday is the same thing. We're gonna eat cereal all day. Mom and dad don't have to cook. Maybe we'll slide.
Do DoorDash.
We're gonna order in a pizza. That's okay. Do that every once in a while because you just need to whoosh, just let it all just kind of,
I think the biggest thing that helped me as a young mom was, and even now as parent of adult children, there is no perfect parent. You're never going to get it all right, and you're not going to be perfect, and you've got to give yourself some grace to realize that, I probably didn't do that quite right, but next time I'll learn from this, and hopefully next time I'll do it better. And I remember when I was a young mom and our kids started going to school, I wanted to make cute little sandwiches for them and have the perfect lunch for them to take in their cute little lunchbox. And that's just not reality. I had a full-time job. Jay had a full-time job, and
we're throwing
whatever
peanut butter jelly and Twinkies in the bag, baby.
It was when they got old enough. I'm like, you're going to have school lunch.
Oh man,
that's what's going to happen, and until they can make their own lunch, and that's just that's not a bad thing. It's what works, and give yourself some grace.
Well, and Belle, we're people of faith, and one of my favorite parables is the parable of the prodigal son, and in that parable, the dad represents who? God, and it's a reminder that even God Himself has children who rebel. He's the perfect father.
Yeah.
and there are those who rebel against him. In fact, Satan, one of his creation, convinced a third of the angels to leave paradise. And God provided everything for them, everything. They were in paradise, for crying out loud. So don't beat yourself up when you make mistakes, when you fail. Give each other grace. That's probably the biggest thing that Laura and I learned, was to give each other grace. No, you didn't handle that right, but we'll fix it. No, you really.
And it doesn't sound like that in the moment.
No,
it's not a,
Right.
oh, give each other grace.
All right, you screwed that one up. They gotta fix it again.
What were you thinking?
Yeah, exactly. But give each other grace. And I think that's the other part of how marriage gives you that opportunity to be imperfect, and yet realize that I'm going to try to really correct these behaviors that are not working. And one of them for me with our kids was my authoritarian tone of voice that, scared them to death, but it really didn't change them. And so I had to realize that, no, these are little children that need to be talked to as if they're tender and they're young, and, they're not 18-year-old privates in the military. They're young children. And so that was a big step for me.
And a lot of what we've discussed so far today, the principles, the broad ideas, apply to parents of kids of all ages. It could be from fresh out of the wrapper until they almost have their bags packed and they're ready to go on. But there are some specifics, I think, that we should share guidance-wise with parents of the really young. Let's go 4 and under as we kind of wind down our time on this episode, knowing that next week we'll turn our attention to the little bit older set where they're in school, they have their friends, they have their devices and all that. What do you want parents of the 4 and under set to take away from the conversation today?
I would say, first and foremost, no matter how smart, how eloquent, how engaging your child is, treat them at the age that they are. They're only 3. Yes, they can carry on a conversation with you, but they're not emotionally developed. They have no understanding of nuances and things. So remember, they're young. That would be my first one.
And I would say, as we've said a few things here in this episode, remember that you're the parents and you're raising these children to move on. So set the boundaries, giving yourself flexibility and grace, but set those boundaries together. Number one, what are our boundaries going to be? Divvy up responsibilities of taking care of those young ones, especially when they're fresh out of the wrapper. Divvy up those responsibilities, say them to each other, communicate about them. So boundaries, responsibilities, and give yourself some time for your marriage. That's the big one, especially when they're so young. Don't be afraid to ask your mom and dad, your spouse's mom and dad, your friends. We just need a night out. We just need 2 hours. Can somebody babysit? And can somebody take care of? Don't be afraid to ask. Somebody will do it. Start with mom and dad. Start with your sisters, your siblings, somebody that you trust. But you've got to give your marriage time.
Get away and get ahead.
And even if it's just for a couple hours. And we would suggest, because we know feasibly you can't do that once a week when they're that young, but once a month, once every 2 months, you got to have that time.
I'm going to give one to the dads, because sometimes we just don't get it. Get on the floor. Just get on the floor. I'll give you a perfect example. A few weeks ago, we had the privilege, we live here in Michigan, and Wayland, Michigan has a balloon festival. And it was a night that we had agreed to watch our granddaughters so our kids could go on a date. Wonderful. Hey, let's go. My aunt said, you want to go to the balloon festival? We're like, sure. All we took was a blanket that we laid out on this big grass field. So everybody, including Grandpa, had to sit on the ground. We laid on our backs, watched the balloons go over our head. Bill, was magical because we were at their level.
Yeah.
we came down to the kids level. We weren't asking them to look up to our level and what, but we got down there and they jumped on us and they giggled with us and they played with us. Why? Because we lowered ourselves to their level for a little while to let them know. And I come back to, is it Joey?
Yeah.
Joey. They felt as if they were we were the only ones that we only cared about them. They were the most important thing in the world. And fellas, when you get down on the floor, you sit down. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. The hardwood is wrecking your backside and your back. But when you do that, their eyes light up because daddy's coming down to us. And that would be a real practical thing, I think, that guys can
And
do.
here's one for the moms and the wives. And that's this, ladies, and this was a hard thing for me to grasp, is that while our husbands are adults, they're not naturally gifted at nurturing and knowing what needs to be done for children. And so being clear and concise with what you need for them to do and what your children need for them to do. They're not stupid. They just need to be educated. And so often I think as wives and moms, we talk to our husbands as if they're stupid because they should just know this stuff. I mean, don't you just know how to take care of
Don't you just know what a Tampa 2 defense is? I mean,
but it's not innate in their nature to be
Right.
nurturers. And so while it is for us, and so being clear and concise with what you need from your husband to do when it comes to your children. I need you to give them a bath that's why the boundaries part is so important, and the responsibilities is that you discuss it and that you let your husband know exactly what it is that you need.
And that communication piece is so rich because you begin to communicate on a level that you never have before. And that is communicating about someone who needs us both.
Mm-hmm.
And as a couple, we're going to give this together. I just think that's beautiful.
I won't paint this brush across all men. I'll just give you my example. As a new dad, once Alyssa got to be 2-ish or so, where she was walking, but it was still really cool to pick her up. My definition of a nurturing bit of care would be piggyback rides. That's far different and far less useful than helping with baths, all the other things that actually matter and pertain directly to their care and their hygiene. But I was thinking, hey, look on my shoulders. And then people would say, oh man, it's so cool to see this with her on your shoulders. And now that I'm a million years older than then, I think, that really wasn't that difficult for me. I think my wife did all the hard stuff back then. And probably as all of us get a bit older, we look back at things that we either could have, if we could reset, if we could have a mulligan, we would probably do some things differently. So thankful for God's grace that when a parent of a young child doesn't get it 100% correct, it doesn't mean you got it 100% wrong.
Right.
We're going to take care. We're going to make sure that we're protective, that we are gentle, that we are nurturing, that we are, as Jay said earlier, remembering that this is a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, that sometimes when they flush the toothbrush down the toilet, it's just plain funny. It's just funny. And I know you're not supposed to laugh because that encourages them, but every once in a while, it's okay to enjoy being a parent. That's a sitcom you couldn't script. It never ends. So there's some of those moments that never fit into the textbook, but I still remember some of those moments as well as anything else that happened during all the years of young child rearing.
One of my favorite memories with my daughter. Of course, Bill, you and I share passion for golf. Love golf. Absolutely love it. And I had the privilege when my daughter was 2 years old to be able to order a brand new driver. It was custom fitted for me. It was a lot of money. I'd saved up to get it. And I'm in the front yard swinging it. I hadn't played with it yet. I had not hit one ball with it yet. And I'm swinging it in the front yard. And my little daughter said, Daddy, what you doing? She's like 2.5, 3 years old. I said, Daddy's swinging the big stick, honey. She says, well, Daddy, can I swing the big stick? And being the good father that I am, I said, sure, honey. Well, I was swinging the big stick next to our driveway, and our little daughter swung the big stick and didn't realize how heavy it was. And so as she swung it, it flew out of her hands and careened down the driveway. Ka-ting, 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 ka-ting. And so this driver I'd never hit a ball with had all sorts of scars on the sides. Luckily, the face was not damaged, but the sides, the top, I mean, every other place, it looked like I'd had it for 5 years. And in that moment, I actually exercised grace that I had never exercised before, because running through my head was, well, which was stupider? Her asking to swing the big stick, or me putting it in her hand.
It reminds me of my friend. He had a problem with his dog always getting into the trash in his kitchen. So he took the dog to obedience training, and he told us the story that the instructor said to him, okay, well, here's how you're going to fix that. You can take a newspaper and roll it up really, really tight. And I want you to take that newspaper and I want you to beat yourself over the head with it 3 times for putting the trash somewhere that the dog could access it. And so every once in a while, we are suffering from self-inflicted injuries.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. And it's not the kids' fault. They're just being kids.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's a great start to the conversation. Again, this is a 2-parter, and down the road, it will probably evolve into a 4, 5, 6, and 7-parter, because who has ever figured out parenting? But this week, as we focus on those kind of in that 4 and younger age group, we'll move into the school years and the developmental years next week when we continue again on Marriage Talk. Again, a reminder that you can visit and hear every episode that Marriage Talk has ever had in its history, including those with Terry and Sandy Ledico from a couple of years ago, on our website at marriagetalk.org. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening.